The Royal Betrayal. In the distant Andromeda Galaxy, on the lush world of Virion, Princess Lisara stood on her palace balcony watching the twin suns set behind crystalline mountains. The palace walls, built from rare bioluminescent stone, pulsed with gentle blue light as evening approached. At 16, Lisara possessed a gift that both awed and terrified her people, the power to command the very elements themselves. With a simple gesture, she could coax flowers to bloom from barren soil or summon rain from cloudless skies. The courtiers whispered that she was the most powerful elemental wielder in generations, perhaps even surpassing the legendary rulers of old. But with great power came great danger. Queen Morala, Lisara's mother, had grown increasingly worried as rival factions within the court began to circle like vultures. Each group sought to claim Lisara's abilities for their own political gains. The queen's trusted advisor, Saran, had warned her countless times that the princess's growing powers were becoming too tempting for ambitious nobles to ignore. "The meteor shower tonight will be magnificent," Queen Morala said, joining her daughter on the balcony. "The people are gathering in the courtyard for the celebration." Lisara smiled, but her mother noticed the sadness in her eyes. "Mother, sometimes I wish I was just a normal girl. Then maybe people would see me for who I am, not what I can do." Before the queen could respond, urgent footsteps echoed through the palace corridors. Saran burst onto the balcony, his face pale with fear. "Your Majesty, we must act immediately. The Council of Nobles has voted, they've decided Princess Lisara's powers pose too great a threat to the balance of power. They're moving against her tonight, during the celebration." The queen's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "A coup, my lady. They plan to capture the princess and use her abilities to overthrow your rule. We have perhaps an hour before they strike." As if on cue, the sounds of celebration from the courtyard below suddenly turned chaotic. Shouts and the clash of metal echoed through the night air. The betrayal had begun earlier than expected. "Take her to the escape pod," Queen Morala commanded, her voice heavy with heartbreak. "Send her to the coordinates we discussed, the safe haven in the outer rim." Lisara's world shattered in an instant. "Mother, no. I won't leave you. You must, my darling. Your survival is more important than anything else. Virion needs you alive, even if it means you must leave for now." Saran gently but firmly took Lisara's arm. "Princess, we must go. Now." As they hurried through the palace's secret passages, the sounds of battle grew louder. Trusted guards had already fallen to the conspirators. Tears streaming down her face, Lisara was rushed to the royal hangar where a small escape pod waited. "This will keep you safe, Your Highness," Saran explained hurriedly as he helped her into the pod. "The journey is long, but you'll reach sanctuary." "I don't want to leave," Lisara sobbed. "This is my home. Remember who you are, Princess. No matter where you go, you carry the strength of Virion within you." With trembling hands, Saran sealed the pod and initiated the launch sequence. The last thing Lisara saw was her home world growing smaller through the porthole, its bioluminescent cities twinkling like distant stars. What she didn't know was that the pod's navigation system had been sabotaged by one of the conspirators. Instead of heading to the safe haven in the outer rim, her pod was now hurtling toward an unknown world on the opposite side of the galaxy, a small blue planet called Earth. Crash landing. Days passed in the cold silence of space. Princess Lisara drifted in and out of consciousness as her escape pod traveled through the star-studded void. The pod's life support systems hummed quietly, keeping her alive as she journeyed farther from home than any of her people had ever traveled. When the navigation system finally chimed, indicating an approaching planet, Lisara barely had time to register what was happening. Through the small porthole, she glimpsed a world of blue oceans and white clouds, nothing like the purple skies and crystal formations of Virion. The pod shuddered violently as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Warning lights flashed red as the heat shield struggled to protect the small craft. Lisara gripped her restraints as the pod tumbled through the sky like a falling star. With a tremendous crash that shook the very ground, the escape pod slammed into the frozen wilderness of Siberia. Snow exploded in all directions as the metal hull carved a deep furrow through the permafrost. The impact was so severe that nearby trees splintered and fell. Inside the pod, systems failed one by one. The gentle blue glow of the power core flickered and died. Emergency lights sparked and went dark. The heating system shut down, and bitter cold began seeping through the damaged hull. Princess Lisara lay unconscious, her breathing shallow. A thin trickle of blue blood, the mark of her alien heritage, ran down her forehead. Her elegant royal robes, designed for the warm climate of Virion, offered little protection against Earth's harsh winter. Hours passed. The wreckage grew cold and silent, becoming just another mysterious object in the vast Siberian landscape. Snow began to drift over the pod's surface, slowly burying it beneath a white blanket. But the crash had not gone completely unnoticed. 50 miles away, in a small research station, Dr. Elena Petrov was monitoring seismic activity when her instruments registered the impact. The readings were unlike anything she'd seen before, too controlled to be a natural meteor, but too energetic to be space debris. "That's strange," she muttered, studying the data. Whatever hit the ground out there, it came down in one piece. She made a note to investigate in the morning, but the remote location and harsh weather would delay any expedition for several days. Meanwhile, in the wilderness where the pod lay buried, something stirred in the forest nearby. A pair of bright blue eyes reflected the moonlight as a magnificent Siberian Husky emerged from between the snow-laden pine trees. Max had been running free for 3 days now, having escaped from a research facility where he'd been treated well but felt constrained. The call of the wild was too strong to ignore, and his powerful legs had carried him deep into the untamed wilderness he'd always longed to explore. The crash had occurred just as Max was settling down for the night in a sheltered grove. The thunderous impact had sent wildlife scattering in all directions, but Max was too curious to flee. His keen nose picked up an unusual scent on the wind, something metallic and strange, unlike anything in his experience. As dawn broke over the frozen landscape, Max began making his way toward the source of the mysterious smell. His thick coat protected him from the bitter cold as he bounded through the deep snow, following an invisible trail that grew stronger with each step. What he would discover buried in that snowy crater would change not just his life, but the fate of 2 worlds separated by impossible distances among the stars. An unlikely bond. Max approached the crash site cautiously, his instincts telling him something extraordinary had happened here. The metallic scent grew stronger as he circled the strange object half buried in the snow. It was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, smooth and alien, with surfaces that seemed to shimmer even under the gray winter sky. Using his powerful paws, Max began digging around the pod's entrance. His thick claws scraped against the foreign metal, creating small sparks. After an hour of determined effort, he managed to expose what appeared to be a sealed doorway. Inside the pod, Princess Lisara stirred. The sound of scratching and the vibrations through the hull slowly brought her back to consciousness. Her head throbbed with pain, and the bitter cold made her shiver uncontrollably. But more alarming was the strange sound coming from outside, rhythmic scraping that didn't match any creature from Virion. Max could sense life within the metal shell. His keen hearing picked up faint breathing and the rapid heartbeat of someone in distress. With renewed determination, he began pawing at what looked like a seam in the pod's surface. Suddenly, with a soft hiss, the emergency release mechanism activated. The pod's door slid open just enough for Max to peer inside. What he saw made him step back in surprise. A young woman with pale blue skin and silver hair lay crumpled inside the strange vessel. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and she was clearly injured. But most remarkable were her eyes. When they fluttered open and met his gaze, they glowed with an inner light unlike anything Max had ever seen. Princess Lisara's first sight of Earth was the concerned face of a magnificent dog. Despite her confusion and pain, she felt no fear. There was something noble and intelligent in the creature's bright blue eyes that reminded her of the loyal guardian beasts of Virion. "Hello," she whispered in her own language, her voice barely audible. Max didn't understand the words, but he recognized the universal language of distress. This strange being was hurt, cold, and frightened, and something deep in his canine heart told him she needed his help. Moving carefully, Max squeezed through the opening into the pod. The space was cramped, but he managed to curl up next to Lisara, sharing his body heat. The warmth was immediately comforting to the frozen princess. Over the next several hours, an extraordinary bond began to form. Despite the language barrier and their vastly different origins, they communicated through gentle touches and meaningful looks. Max brought her snow to quench her thirst and stayed close to keep her warm. Lisara, meanwhile, began to understand that this loyal creature had somehow found her and chosen to help her. Using small amounts of her elemental power, careful not to frighten him, she melted snow for drinking water and created tiny warmth currents in the air around them. Max watched in amazement as the strange woman made water appear from ice and warmth from seemingly nothing. Rather than being afraid, he was fascinated. In his simple but profound way, he understood that she was special, and that she trusted him with her secrets. As night fell on their first day together, Lisara managed to speak a few words in halting English, a language her royal education had included for diplomatic purposes. "Thank you," she said softly, stroking Max's thick fur. "I am Lisara." Max's tail wagged gently, and he pressed closer to her side. He might not understand where she came from or why she was different, but he knew one thing for certain: he would protect her with his life. But their sanctuary in the crashed pod wouldn't last forever. The weather was growing worse, and Lisara's injuries needed proper treatment. Soon, they would have to venture out into the harsh Siberian wilderness, beginning a journey that would test both their courage and their extraordinary friendship. Journey through the wilderness. 3 days had passed since Max discovered Princess Lisara in the crashed pod. Her strength was slowly returning, but the bitter Siberian cold was taking its toll. The pod's damaged systems provided no heat, and their small shelter was becoming increasingly dangerous as ice formed on the interior walls. Lisara knew they couldn't stay much longer. Using her elemental abilities, she had been melting snow for water and creating small pockets of warmth, but each use of her powers left her more exhausted. She was far from home, injured, and her body wasn't adapted to Earth's harsh climate. Max seemed to understand their predicament. He had ventured out several times, scouting the surrounding area and returning with news only he could interpret. On the 4th morning, he came back with pine branches in his mouth and began arranging them near the pod's entrance. "You want us to leave?" Lisara asked, reading the intelligence in his eyes. Max barked once, a sound she had learned meant yes, and trotted a few steps away from the pod before looking back at her expectantly. Gathering her courage, Lisara pulled herself from the pod's cramped interior. The cold hit her immediately, but Max was already beside her, offering his strong back for support. Together, they began their journey through the snow-covered wilderness. Max led the way with sure instincts, following animal trails and natural shelters that provided some protection from the wind. Lisara marveled at his knowledge of the terrain. Every few hours, he would find caves or thick groves of trees where they could rest. During one such rest, Lisara discovered she could communicate with the local plant life. With gentle touches, she encouraged dormant seeds to sprout, creating small patches of edible berries and nutritious roots. Max watched in wonder as she literally made food grow from nothing, his respect for his strange companion growing even deeper. On their second night of travel, they took shelter in an abandoned hunter's cabin. The roof leaked and the walls were rough, but it was warmer than sleeping in the open. As they huddled together for warmth, Lisara began to tell Max about her home world, even though she knew he couldn't understand her words. "My planet has 2 suns," she said softly, creating small illusions of light with her powers to show him. "The trees are made of crystal, and the oceans are silver. My people can live for hundreds of your Earth years." Max listened intently, his head tilted as he watched the beautiful light shapes she created in the air. Though he didn't understand her language, he sensed the sadness and longing in her voice. The next morning brought a new challenge. A pack of wolves had picked up their scent and was following them through the forest. Max sensed them first, his hackles rising as he caught their smell on the wind. When the wolves finally showed themselves, emerging from the trees in a threatening semicircle, Max positioned himself between them and Lisara. He was outnumbered, but his loyalty was absolute. The alpha wolf snarled, taking a step forward. Max growled back, every muscle in his body tense for battle. But Lisara had another solution. Drawing upon her deepest reserves of power, she extended her consciousness to the wolves themselves. In their simple but pure minds, she planted images of peace and plenty, a nearby valley where deer were abundant and territorial disputes were unnecessary. The wolves paused, confused by the sudden shift in their instincts. The alpha's aggressive posture relaxed as visions of an easier life filled his mind. One by one, the pack turned away, loping off toward the valley Lisara had shown them. Max looked back at her with something approaching awe. Not only had she saved them both from a potentially deadly fight, but she had done it without harming the wolves. As they continued their journey, the bond between the alien princess and the Earth dog deepened. They were no longer just survivor and rescuer, they had become true companions, each protecting and caring for the other. But ahead of them lay an even greater challenge. In the distance, smoke rose from human settlement. Soon, they would have to face Princess Lisara's greatest test yet, revealing herself to the people of Earth and hoping to find allies rather than enemies in this strange new world. New beginnings. After a week of traveling through the Siberian wilderness, Princess Lisara and Max finally reached the outskirts of human civilization. The research station Dr. Elena Petrov operated was small and isolated, perfect for their first contact with Earth's inhabitants. Lisara's heart raced as they approached the cluster of buildings. Everything looked so different from Virion's crystal architecture, yet there was a practical beauty to the human structures that she found oddly comforting. Dr. Petrov was the first person to spot them. She had been outside checking weather instruments when she saw a figure and a large dog emerging from the forest. At first glance, the person appeared to be wearing an unusual costume, but as they drew closer, Elena realized something extraordinary was happening. The woman's skin had a distinctly blue tint, and her hair was silver like moonlight. Her clothes, though torn and dirty from the journey, were made of materials Elena had never seen before. Most striking were her eyes, they seemed to hold depths of starlight. "Hello," Lisara called out in carefully practiced English, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. "I need help." Elena approached cautiously, her scientific mind racing. "Are you injured? How did you get out here?" Max stayed close to Lisara's side, his protective instincts alert but not aggressive. He seemed to understand that this human was different from the threats they had faced in the wilderness. Over the next few hours, as Elena provided food, warmth, and medical attention, an incredible story slowly emerged. Lisara revealed her true nature carefully, demonstrating her elemental abilities by making a wilted plant bloom and creating water from the air. Elena, trained in scientific skepticism but faced with undeniable evidence, gradually accepted the impossible truth. She was harboring a refugee from another world, a princess whose own people had tried to destroy her. "Your pod," Elena said suddenly. "I detected the crash on my instruments. You're the source of those readings." Lisara nodded. "My escape ship is damaged beyond repair. I am stranded on your world." Rather than fear or rejection, Elena felt a surge of excitement and compassion. Here was the discovery of a lifetime, but more importantly, here was a young woman who needed sanctuary. Over the following weeks, Elena helped Lisara adapt to life on Earth. The princess learned more English, discovered human customs, and began to understand her new world. Max remained her constant companion, bridging the gap between alien and human with his simple, pure loyalty. Lisara's elemental powers proved invaluable to the research station. She could predict weather patterns by sensing atmospheric changes, help the station's greenhouse flourish even in winter, and solve water purification problems with a gentle touch. But perhaps most importantly, she began to heal emotionally from the trauma of her exile. The kindness of Dr. Petrov and the unwavering friendship of Max showed her that home wasn't necessarily a place, it was where you were loved and accepted for who you truly were. One evening, as the three of them sat watching the aurora borealis paint the sky in brilliant colors, Lisara made a decision that would change everything. "I want to help Earth," she said quietly. "My people cast me out because they feared my power. But here, I can use my abilities to heal instead of harm." Elena smiled. "The world could use someone like you. But it won't be easy. People fear what they don't understand." "Then we'll help them understand," Lisara replied, stroking Max's fur. "My friend here taught me that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about doing what's right even when you are afraid." Max looked up at her with those intelligent blue eyes and wagged his tail, as if to say he would stand by her no matter what challenges lay ahead. As months passed, Lisara became known in the small scientific community as a brilliant environmental researcher with an unusual gift for biological sciences. Her true nature remained a carefully guarded secret, known only to Elena and a few trusted colleagues. She established a foundation dedicated to environmental healing, using her powers discreetly to restore damaged ecosystems and help endangered species recover. Max became her certified therapy dog, his presence allowing her to connect with people who might otherwise be suspicious of her unusual abilities. Years later, when asked about her greatest accomplishment, Princess Lisara would always give the same answer, learning that the greatest power isn't what you can do with your abilities, but what you choose to do with them. And Max, now older but still devoted, would rest his head on her lap as she spoke, the loyal dog who had defied the stars themselves to save a princess, and in doing so, had given both their worlds a gift beyond measure. In the depths of space, on the distant world of Virion, Queen Morala sometimes stood on her palace balcony and looked up at the stars. She didn't know her daughter had survived, but she whispered prayers to the twin suns that somewhere among those distant lights, Lisara had found peace. On Earth, in a small research station in Siberia, those prayers had been answered in the most unexpected way possible, through the brave heart of a dog who saw past differences to the soul within, and chose love over fear. The end.